Have you ever seen one of those articles with a headline like, "Here's how much the average person your age has saved for retirement," and immediately felt like you had to click on it? I know I have. Even when we tell ourselves that we should not compare our finances to other people, there's still something almost irresistible about finding out where we stand. We want to know whether we are ahead, behind, or somewhere in the middle. We want a number that tells us whether we are doing retirement correctly. That desire makes sense because money gives us something concrete to measure. Happiness is difficult to quantify. Peace of mind does not come with a score. Freedom, purpose, and life satisfaction cannot be neatly added up on a spreadsheet. But retirement savings can. Your account balance is right there in front of you, which makes it very easy to treat that number as a report card for your entire financial life. Hi, I'm Michelle, and on my channel we talk about creating a peaceful, confident life after 50, especially if you're living alone, traveling solo, or navigating retirement. I think one reason financial comparison statistics are so popular is that most of us feel a little uncertain about whether we're doing enough. We may wonder whether we saved enough, retired too early, waited too long, spent too much, or lived too simply. Looking at what other people have can temporarily quiet that uncertainty because it gives us a yardstick. When we discover that we have more saved than the average person our age, it can feel reassuring. It may confirm that all those years of saving, investing, and making careful choices were worth it. We might feel proud of ourselves and more confident about the future. On the other hand, if we find out that we have less than the average person, it may motivate us to make changes. We might start saving more, reducing some of our expenses, or take a closer look at our retirement plans. The problem begins when we stop treating those numbers as general information and start treating them as a verdict on our future. A benchmark may tell you what a group of people have saved, but it cannot tell you whether you personally have saved enough. It does not know where you live, what your expenses are, and whether you have a pension, how much Social Security you'll receive, whether you own or rent, or what kind of retirement you actually want. Two people can retire with the exact same amount of money and have completely different experiences. Imagine two people who each have $800,000 saved. One lives in a lower cost area, has no debt, enjoys inexpensive hobbies, cooks most meals at home, and receives enough Social Security to cover much of their basic spending. The other lives in an expensive city, still has a mortgage, helps support an adult child, travels internationally several times a year, and has high health care costs. Their account balances are identical, but their financial lives are not. One may feel comfortable and secure, while the other may feel stretched every month. That's why simply asking how much other people have saved does not necessarily tell you how much you need. Where you can live can make a huge difference. $1 million may provide a very comfortable retirement in one part of the country and feel more limiting in another. Housing costs, taxes, insurance, transportation, food, and health care can vary dramatically from one location to another. Even two people living in the same state can face completely different expenses, depending on whether they live in a large city, a small town, or a rural area. Housing choices make these comparisons even more complicated. Someone who owns a mortgage-free home may look like they're in a stronger financial position than someone who rents. But owning a home does not mean housing is free. There's still property taxes, insurance, utilities, maintenance, and repairs. A new roof, a furnace, plumbing problems, or foundation issues can create a large expense with very little warning. A renter has regular monthly payments and must live with the possibility that the rent may increase. At the same time, the renter usually is not responsible for replacing the roof, repairing the furnace, or dealing with a major structural problem. Renting creates one kind of financial risk while owning creates another. I've rented for many years, including throughout retirement, and I know there are people who believe everyone should own a home by a certain age. For me, however, home ownership is not the goal. I value the flexibility of renting, and I like knowing that major repairs are not my responsibility. Another person may feel much more secure owning a paid-off house and knowing they will never have to deal with a landlord. Neither choice is automatically right or wrong. They simply reflect different priorities. That's the part retirement comparison statistics usually leave out. Lifestyle matters just as much. Someone who wants to spend retirement traveling internationally, staying in luxury hotels, eating at expensive restaurants, and participating in costly hobbies will naturally need a larger budget. Someone else may be perfectly happy gardening, volunteering, spending time with grandchildren, reading, taking walks, and going on the occasional road trip. Neither person is doing retirement better. They're just funding different lives. This is why it can be misleading to compare account balances without also comparing the lifestyle those accounts are meant to support. A person with fewer savings may have very modest expenses and feel completely comfortable. Another person may have a much larger portfolio, but also have expenses and expectations that require far more money. We also need to remember that we rarely see the full financial picture of the people that we're comparing ourselves to. We see the car, the house, the vacation, or the beautifully renovated kitchen, but we don't see the debt behind it. We don't know whether the vacation went on a credit card or whether the person is worried about money every night. Social media makes this even harder because it shows us the visible results of spending and not the invisible financial structure underneath it. We see the cruise, but we don't see the credit card statements. We see the new kitchen, but we don't see the home equity loan. We see someone retiring at 55, but we don't see the pension, inheritance, health insurance arrangement, or years of carefully planning that helped make it possible. Comparison can also make us less happy when we're doing perfectly fine. There will almost always be someone who has more money, owns a larger home, receives a better pension, or travels more often. If our definition of success depends on having more than the person next to us, the finish line will keep moving. So what should we be looking for instead? The first and most useful number is your actual spending, not what financial articles say you should spend and not what your neighbor spends. What does your real life cost? Look at your housing, food, transportation, health care, insurance, travel, entertainment, gifts, subscriptions, and irregular expenses. Be honest about the way you actually live. Don't create a fantasy retirement budget based on a version of yourself who never eats out, never travels, and never helps family, and never buys anything unexpected. Your retirement plan has to support the person that you really are. The next thing to look at is how much of your spending will be covered by reliable income. That might include Social Security, a pension, rental income, annuity payments, part-time work, or income from a small business. If your dependable income covers most of your basic living expenses, you may not need as much in savings as someone who has to pay for nearly everything through investment withdrawals. The number that really matters is the gap between your dependable income and your spending. That gap is what your savings and investments need to cover. For example, imagine two people who each spend $50,000 a year. One receives $40,000 from Social Security and a pension, which leaves a $10,000 gap. The other receives $20,000 from Social Security, leaving a $30,000 gap. They have the same annual spending, but they don't need the same amount of savings. You also need to consider irregular expenses. Cars need repairs, rent goes up, houses need roofs, dental work happens, healthcare costs can change. A retirement plan has to be able to handle those abnormal years, not just the months when everything goes according to plan. Another important measurement is your ability to adjust. Could you cut back on travel for a year if the market had a bad stretch? Could you move to a smaller home? Could you delay a major purchase? Could you earn some income through a part-time work, consulting, freelancing, or a creative project? A person with a slightly smaller portfolio but a flexible lifestyle may actually be more secure than someone with more money, very high expenses that cannot be easily changed. The most important measurement of all is this: is your retirement helping you live the life you actually want? You could have more money than the average retiree and still feel lonely, bored, stressed, or afraid to spend any of your money. You could have less than the recommended benchmark and still wake up every morning feeling peaceful, useful, connected, and grateful for your freedom. The goal is to use the resources you have to create a life that's sustainable, meaningful, and right for you. Instead of asking how your retirement compares with everyone else's, it may be more helpful to ask whether you can comfortably cover your basic expenses, whether you understand where your money is going, and whether you have a plan for health care and unexpected costs. Ask yourself whether your savings can reasonably support the gap between your income and your spending, and whether you have enough flexibility to make changes if it does not go exactly the way as planned. Most importantly, ask yourself whether the life you're building actually feels like yours. The answer to these questions will tell you far more about your retirement than knowing the average account balance of another person your age. In the description below, there's a link to my journal, kind of workbook, that goes through all of these questions to design the retirement that you actually want. Comparison statistics can be interesting, and they may provide some useful context, but they should not become the standard by which you judge your entire life. Your retirement does not need to look like your neighbor's retirement, your parents' retirement, or the version of retirement shown in financial advertisements. It needs to fit your expenses, your health, your relationships, your priorities, and your definition of a good life. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do financial benchmarks make you feel more prepared, or do they make you feel like you're falling behind? Thank you so much for watching.